The best reworks in my opinion are the ones that take an existing champion, reinvest their power budget, and design abilities in a more cohesive yet practical way that results in the champion having more or less the same playstyle and aspects to them that they had before, but implemented in a way that leads to better results, higher skill expression, and more playmaking potential, while at the same time still giving the opposing team a clear through line in how to exploit their weaknesses. Some of the best examples in the game would be Shen, Fiddlesticks, Nunu, and Volibear, who all play almost exactly the same as how they were before, but remodeled in a more pragmatic fashion. I talked about Nunu's CGU before and very much enjoyed how they reworked him, and I do plan to discuss Shen's rework in the future as well. But for today I want to go through Volibear's rework, because I find that his story closely resembles that of Aatrox's, wherein prior to getting adjusted, Riot gave a minor update to his gameplay that actually made Voli a pretty solid champion, and when they finally got around to reworking him, unlike old Aatrox, they had the decency to keep his old theme, but make it even better. We're back with another episode of the Rework Retrospective, and for today we'll be talking about Bear. Much like every other champion that was part of the VGU initiative, the biggest issue Volibear struggled with in the early days was the absence of a proper through line connecting his abilities together, and for that matter a lack of any noteworthy incentive to play him over anyone else. Juggernauts by and large all struggle with being different variations of stat sticks. There were big meat shields with a minute gimmick between each of them, and Volibear was no different. Two things were negatively affecting his performance and popularity prior to getting retrofitted. First and foremost, he just didn't do anything. If you were to take a look at his gameplay, it very much gave off a 2010 feel to it. His abilities were so basic and bland that no one would call you crazy for making the presumption that Riot had a jar of random abilities and they just picked 5 random ones. The irony is that Volibear came out after the likes of Riven, Jarvan, Lux, Lee Sin, Orianna, all of whom still have the same kits as the day they came out, and yet compared to their repertoires, Voli's looks worse than even champions that came out back in 2009. Let's open up with this passive, Chosen of the Storm. A very simple passive, but to its credit, its simplicity belies how effective it is. When Voli drops below 30% HP, he regenerates 30% HP, essentially a miniature Mundo ultimate turned into a passive. 30% health even in the early game, or should I say especially in the early game, is a big deal. Most champions don't have the DPS and or cooldowns to blast through more than maybe half of your total health pool. Keep in mind we're talking before he got reworked. The game had nowhere near the same damage creep as it does now, where people get 100 to 0 starting level 3. You would exhaust your entire combo on Volibear and then halfway through realize he's not dying since his passive kicked in. Chosen of the Storm was so overtuned that Ryan had to give it a flat 2-minute cooldown to prevent Voli from stat checking you in lane too hard. Basically, half the time Volibear had no passive, but whenever he did, it was like I said, a Mundo ultimate for a passive. While a strong ability, it didn't really play into any of his other stuff, it was just a standalone passive, the same as most other early day champions like Nasus. His active abilities didn't do too much to alleviate this either. Rolling Thunder gave him bonus movement speed, which more than doubled when running towards enemy champions. It would also empower his next basic attack to fling enemies behind him and do bonus damage. A decent ability in a vacuum, but again it just didn't really synergize with anything else in his kit for a long time. Frenzy was an execute tool that gave him stacking bonus attack speed similarly to Jack's passive, and at 3 stacks you were able to damage a target for a huge amount of base damage and bonus health. Thanks to the missing HP component, it was often reserved as an execute, and to his credit, it was a very strong one, dealing easily up to 6,800 damage or potentially 1,000 in the late game if the enemy champion had no armor. Majestic Roar had to have been one of the most pointless abilities in the game prior to version 8.4. Before 8.4, all it did was deal magic damage in an area around him that slowed enemies while terrifying minions and monsters. That's it. J-Force Golden Aegis, but instead of a trivial amount of shielding, it was a trivial amount of damage. Granted, a 3-second slow is quite significant, especially being AoE, but considering you maxed out last, a 30% slow wasn't all that relevant. It would have easily been considered one of the least impactful abilities in the game. Finally, we have his old ultimate, Thunderclaws. Personally, I think this was heavily slept on for an ultimate. It may have been one of the best level 6 power spikes in the game. Unlike other steroid ultimates, it didn't give any stat increases. Rather, it made his attacks do on and magic damage and chain onto nearby targets. During a teamfight, Voli would be shredding through everyone's HP without them realizing, because if you think about it, doing 100 damage on hit matters a lot. At rank 1, just a bonus 75% damage on hit would be the same as if Jax's third strike applied on every single auto attack. It was pretty substantial. And remember, he got up to 75% bonus attack speed from Frenzy, so he would be doing some pretty solid damage. The issue remained all the same though. You could take away any one of Voli's abilities and it would not at all affect the performance or reliability of the other ones. Not to say every champion needs to have a through line connecting everything, but design-wise, Voli had no real identity. A simple combo was stick you onto a target, throw them over, then press ultimate and start whacking at them and ending off with Frenzy, but you could go about it in realistically any order. Second problem was that Voli had virtually no scaling in his kit, making him nothing but an early game cheese pick that turned into a meat shield late game. The only thing that can make him stronger was bonus health by way of Frenzy, but Rolling Thunder had no scaling, Majestic Roar had no scaling, and neither did Thunderclaws because there was no proper AP Bruiser itemization back then, and even then you got more value building HP. He was a whole nothing burger of a champion. Voli would only be stronger than other Juggernauts if you inted against him in early game by not respecting his strong base damage and tankiness. Come 20 minutes, he was subjectively worse than most if not all other Juggernauts, even the likes of Udyr, who similarly didn't do very much except walk up to you and be a stun bot. Funnily enough, all it took was a single change to Majestic Roar that made it go from one of the least impactful abilities in the game to arguably one of the most. In version 8.4, they not only gave Voli a bit more movement speed on Q, minion cooldown reduction on W to allow him to lane more effectively, but they also gave Majestic Roar a super bot, dealing bonus damage to enemies that were dashing or airborne, 1.5 times more to be exact, but it would also knock back enemies. Majestic Roar is a fairly wide area blast that more importantly had no cast time, you could press it immediately. Though it was only like a quarter-second knockup at that, the fact that it was a knockback allowed Voli to shut down any champion who relied on dashes, notably dashes with a long enough animation that you could react to it. For example, this one single change made the Volibear Riven matchup go from +1 in her favor to a -1, a complete 180 since Volibear could always cancel Riven's third Q, eliminating a big portion of her threat potential. Volibear actually screwed over a lot of top laners with this. He could interrupt Jack's Q, Fiora Q, Irelia Q if he had good reflexes, Camille E, Ornn E, Gragas, Tryndamere, Pantheon. Most dashes in the game are slow enough to where anyone with normal reaction time could press E and instantly cancel them. You didn't have to be super close to them either. Majestic Roar had a 425 cast range, almost far enough to hit a ranged auto attack champion. Interrupting any of their dashes would severely cripple their strength, making Voli a very strong counterpick champion throughout seasons 8 and 9, especially after Z turned into max health damage, giving him more meaningful pressure against tanks. Short-lived it may have been, Volibear very much enjoyed this newfound viability in top lane. Even against champions without a dash, she could force them to take the bonus damage with the aid of his Q-Fling, resulting in a strong burst rate combo. In teamfights, that momentary disruption gave Voli a lot more presence too, and though ultimately he would lose Majestic Roar altogether, during the time he had it, and I speak from experience, it was enough of a change to make him quite strong, albeit still a stat checker. What he got in return for relinquishing his old kit was even better though. It would be no exaggeration to say that all parts of Voli's kit were substantially improved by his CGU, and despite every single ability being transformed in one way or another, he still kind of had the same feel as the old one, where you charge up to a target and start beating them down, but with much more nuance as to how you want to go about it. To begin with, Volibear's ultimate became his passive, which I feel like makes a lot more sense. They took the ramping attack speed on his W and the chain lightning on his ultimate and combined them into the Relentless Storm, numbers dialed down of course. Both the lightning damage and the ramping attack speed now scale off AP, giving you a worthwhile incentive to run AP health items which we now have more access to. Rolling Thunder and Thundering Smash are pretty much identical, the only difference is that they gave him actual AD scaling on the attack, and instead of flinging enemies over him, it's now just a 1-second stun, kind of like Udyr's old bear stance. A handy quality of life thing they gave to Voli is that anytime he gets hard CC'd, he can recast Q, effectively making it so CCing him extends the bonus tempo he gains. Very nice to have, considering one major weakness of old Volibear was that he would get perma-kited. Regardless, Rolling Thunder was the least problematic part of his past iteration anyway. Frenzy and Mull traded a bit of burst potential in exchange for more sustained DPS and healing. Instead of being an all-or-nothing big bite, it's a targeted attack that applies on-hit effects as if it were a basic attack, and if Voli were to attack the same target again within 8 seconds, he does bonus damage and heals for a big amount of missing health. This affords Volibear incredible staying power, which was something he was missing before despite being a Juggernaut, the class known for staying power. Granting more consistent pressure through his passive and W simultaneously addresses two things. 1. Being overly dependent on cheesing people in the early game, and 2. Opening up the opportunity to give him better scaling, which they have. Sky Splitter may be the most interesting ability though because it completely replaces Majestic Roar with an altogether new function. Voli no longer has any displacements in his kit, making him vulnerable to champions who can dash again. But Sky Splitter adds a unique dynamic to Volibear's kit. First, it's a long-ranged area blast on a 2-second delay. Enemies hit by it take a significant chunk of damage, and if Volibear himself's inside it, he gets a big shield, kind of like Echo's Parallel Convergence, but instead of a stun, it's damage. So they took the magic damage and AoE slow from Majestic Roar, but instead of a knockback, Voli can now get a shield and it can be cast at a far distance. This in tandem with his ultimate now being a passive grants Volibear a pretty solid neutral game for a Juggernaut since he can poke enemies from afar, and even affords a bit of supportive utility in that he can use Sky Splitter to scout for enemies in Fog of War. The challenge of landing this ability is made up for by its payoff, immense burst damage and an equivalent shield. Furthermore, Voli has agency in landing Sky Splitter more easily courtesy of Thundering Smash, making it so you only have to aim 1 second in the attack. While I find Majestic Roar to be a better you to dash champions, Sky Splitter definitely wins out in terms of versatility. It's a powerful ability, but not something Volibear can easily guarantee, so he can't abuse it and just harass you in lane from afar unless he is like aimbot or something. The only way he can quote-unquote guarantee the ability is by stunning you, behaving as a kind of balancing dynamic. Last but not least, the main thing finally establishing Volibear's identity, Stormbringer. One of the biggest problems affecting old Volibear was that nothing he did particularly stood out. For all intents and purposes, he was a meat shield, but at that point you could play literally anyone else. To some extent, current Volibear is also sort of a meat shield that charges at a person and tries to hack and slash away at them, but with Stormbringer, he now has something only he can really do, disable towers. It's also a small dash that can do a ton of damage on impact and give him bonus health. Compared to Thunderclaws, Stormbreaker is a far better ultimate in what it can do. You can dive towers, use it to gap close, use the displacement immunity to bypass hooks and crowd control. Some people get a bit annoyed by the Allmrecker part of this and that it makes tower diving too easy, but I for one enjoy that it has something more to it than just disabling towers. It is good offensive playmaking and engage potential. I think that's part of the reason why people find Volibear to be more interactive now despite its overall gameplay being straightforward. Yes, you can choose to play him Unga Bunga and make a beeline for your target mashing W on them until they die, but you can also choose to play a more trade-oriented style with E and Q to chunk enemies before running away. You can aim to poke them over and over with W and try to outlast them. If you need him to be a meat shield, you can. If you need him to deal damage, you can. If you want to split push with him, you can. If you need him to be stun bot, you can. He's just a versatile juggernaut overall. On that note, Volibear might be one of the most build-diverse champions out there. He went from having no real incentive to building anything besides health to having an incentive to build virtually every item in the game, or at least a lot of them. He can run multiple keystones like Grasp, Pressy Attack, Phase Rush, or Lethal Tempo. He can go an AP Bruiser build by going Cosmic Drive and Full Tank. He can go AT Bruiser with Thunder Sky and Sterex. He can go for a Jack of all trades build by taking Roa into Flicker Blade into Spirit Visage. He can of course go full tank if you feel like it, or you can go super degen AP by running Nashor's Tooth, Riftmaker, Cosmic Drive, and powering up his attack speed, Chain Lightning, Sky Splitter, and Stormbringer damage. There are so many different ways you can build him depending on the situation, not only making him fun to play, but also serving as a point of meta resilience, given his performance doesn't hinge on solely one item. If one item gets nerfed, Voli can just hop on another. Few other champions in League have the same build options that he does. That kind of flexibility ensures a consistent degree of agency, and while he's by no means the strongest Juggernaut, far from it, there's never a point in time where he's a bad option either. Like I said, he has healing and shielding, burst rate and sustained DPS, high tempo thanks to his Q, and a mini gap closer in his ultimate, good wave clear with his E and passive. He's got a bit of everything. Mind you, not a lot of anything, so when facing someone more specialized than him, he might seem a bit less appealing. But Volibear is a prime example of a champion with the ability to wear multiple hats, and not only have a purpose to each of those hats, but it doesn't feel overloaded because it still falls within the realm of a Juggernaut. Voli isn't able to 1v9 the game or do stupid bullshit to cheat his way out of something. He still adheres to the same rules and boundaries of the game. In essence, the most he does is bend the rules, he doesn't break them. Now, despite being one of the few who enjoyed old Volibear, I would very easily consider current Volibear to be one of the best visual gameplay updates of all time. They gave him so much more and made him able to do many things while still feeling like old Volibear to some extent and not being a problem champion. Let's also not forget about the visual upgrade. This man went from Polar Bear to God Bear. It's awesome. Anyway, what do you guys think about Volibear's rework? Do you like it or do you think they ruined him? Let me know in the comments down below. That's it for today, so if you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate it if you left a like and subscribe. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter @Vars, join my Discord server, and check out my other Rework Retrospective videos if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.